But because of the way she said it, like she'd rehearsed it 100 times, like she knew exactly how insane it sounded and didn't care. This wasn't desperation. This was survival. Jack Gravel Mercer wasn't the kind of man who scared easy. 46 years old, road captain for the Iron Disciples, a motorcycle club that ran clean but didn't run soft. He'd seen bar fights, border runs, and enough broken men to know when someone was carrying weight they couldn't put down. But this woman, standing in the rain with $12 and a dress that looked older than most of the bikes in the lot, she shook something loose in him. He gestured toward the overhang near the entrance. "Get out of the rain first," he said, his voice low and steady. She nodded and followed him, slow but sure, like every step hurt, but quitting wasn't an option. Up close, Jack could see the details. The pink dress was homemade, stitched and restitched in places, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. Her hands trembled. Her eyes were sharp, too sharp for someone who should have been invisible to the world. She set the plastic bag down carefully and pulled out a small envelope, the kind you'd get from a bank. Inside were 12 $1 bills, folded neatly. "This is all I have left," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I walked here from Riverside Court. 2 miles. Took me an hour and a half." Jack didn't reach for the money. "What's your name?" "Eleanor. Eleanor Mayfield." "Eleanor, I don't know what you think I do, but I'm not for hire." She looked at him like he'd just told her the sky wasn't blue. "I know exactly what you do," she said. "You protect people. You don't look away." Jack studied her face. There was no con here, no angle. Just exhaustion and something harder underneath, something that had been beaten down but refused to break. "Why me?" he asked. Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Because I went everywhere else first." She said it like it was an indictment. And maybe it was. Jack pulled out a chair from one of the weathered picnic tables under the overhang. "Sit down," he said, "and tell me everything." Eleanor lowered herself onto the bench, her movements careful and practiced. She smoothed the wet fabric of her dress across her knees and took a breath. "I raised my grandson," she began. "His name is Tommy. His mother, my daughter Rachel, she died when he was 6. Cancer. Fast and cruel. His father was never in the picture, so it was just us. Me and Tommy." Her voice carried the weight of years, of bedtime stories and school plays, and all the small moments that built a life. "Tommy's a good boy. Never gave me trouble. Got himself through community college. Worked at the hardware store on Palmer Street. Lived in a little apartment above the laundromat on 5th. Nothing fancy, but it was his. He was proud of it." Jack listened without interrupting, watching the way Eleanor's hands moved as she spoke, restless and searching. "About 10 months ago, Tommy started having headaches. Bad ones. He'd call me, confused sometimes, forgetting things. Little things at first. Where he'd parked his truck. Whether he'd already had breakfast. I told him to see a doctor." Eleanor's eyes grew distant. "He went to the clinic. They ran some tests, said it might be stress, maybe early signs of something more serious, but they couldn't be sure. Told him to come back in a month. But before that month was up, I got a call from his landlord. Said Tommy hadn't paid rent in 6 weeks. That wasn't like him. Tommy was responsible. He paid his bills on time, always had." She paused. "I went to his apartment. The landlord let me in. It was empty. Not moved out empty. Abandoned empty. His clothes were still in the closet. His toothbrush was still by the sink. His truck was still parked out back. But Tommy was gone." Jack's jaw tightened. He'd heard stories like this before, but they never got easier. "Did you file a missing person report?" Eleanor nodded. "First thing I did. Went straight to the police station. They took my information, said they'd look into it. 2 weeks went by. Nothing. I called every day. Finally, they told me Tommy wasn't missing. They said he'd checked himself into a care facility voluntarily because of his medical condition. Said I should be relieved he was getting help." "But you didn't believe them," Jack said. Eleanor's eyes snapped to his, fierce and clear. "I tried to visit him. They told me the facility was private, that I wasn't on his approved visitor list. I said I was his grandmother, his only family. They said it didn't matter. Patient confidentiality. They wouldn't even tell me where he was. Her voice cracked. How does a woman lose her grandson and no one thinks that's strange? How does a 32-year-old man disappear from his own life and everyone just accepts it? Jack felt anger building in his chest, the kind that didn't explode but settled deep and cold. When did Victor Lane come into this? Eleanor's expression hardened. About a year ago, just before Tommy started getting sick. There was a community meeting at the senior center about financial planning for elderly residents. Victor was the speaker. He was charming, professional, talked about how important it was to have someone you trust manage your affairs if you couldn't do it yourself. How many seniors get taken advantage of by scammers? She laughed bitterly. He had everyone eating out of his hand. After the meeting, he came up to me personally, said he'd noticed I was there alone, asked if I had family nearby. I told him about Tommy. He seemed so interested, so concerned. Said he ran a care coordination service, that if I ever needed help with medical appointments or paperwork, I should call him. Eleanor's hands clenched into fists. When Tommy started having problems a few months later, I remembered Victor's offer. I called him. He came to my house that same day, brought paperwork, said it was just a precaution in case Tommy's condition got worse. Power of attorney forms, medical proxy documents. He said it would make things easier if Tommy needed someone to make decisions for him. Jack could see where this was headed. You signed them. No, Eleanor said sharply. I didn't. I told Victor the first wanted to talk to Tommy first, that I didn't feel right signing anything without his knowledge. Victor smiled and said of course, that was very wise. He left the papers with me and said to call him when I was ready. I never called. I never signed anything. Jack leaned forward. But somehow he got control anyway. Eleanor nodded. After Tommy disappeared, I started digging. I went to the county clerk's office, requested copies of any documents filed in Tommy's name. That's when I found them. Power of attorney papers, signed by me, notarized and filed about a month before Tommy went missing. Except I never signed them. That's not my signature. She reached into her plastic bag and pulled out a folded document, protected in a clear plastic sleeve. She handed it to Jack. He unfolded it carefully and studied the signature line. Even to his untrained eye, it looked off. The letters were too uniform, too careful, not the natural flow of someone signing their own name. I took this to the police, Eleanor continued. Showed them the forgery. They said it looked legitimate to them, that maybe I'd forgotten signing it. Forgotten? Like I'm some confused old woman who can't remember signing away her grandson's life. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Jack set the document down. This wasn't just about a missing grandson. This was about a system that had decided she didn't matter, that her word meant nothing, that she was invisible. You went to your church, he said quietly. Eleanor nodded. Pastor Williams. I've been attending that church for 40 years. I thought surely he would help me, or at least believe me. He listened, nodded in all the right places, and then he told me to pray about it. Said God works in mysterious ways, and maybe this was part of his plan for Tommy. I asked him what kind of God's plan involves forging documents and stealing someone's life. He said I was upset and not thinking clearly. She took a breath. I went to 3 different lawyers. The first one wanted a $5,000 retainer just to look at my case. I don't have $5,000. The second one said elder law wasn't his specialty. The third one took my information and said he'd call me back. That was 6 weeks ago. Jack felt something shift inside him. He'd spent the last 8 years keeping his distance from other people's problems, building walls around the parts of himself that still bled when he thought about losing his wife and son. But sitting across from Eleanor, seeing the steel in her spine and the exhaustion in her eyes, he knew those walls were coming down. What made you come here? He asked. To a biker bar? Eleanor met his gaze without flinching. I was walking home from the senior center 2 days ago. It was late, almost dark. A group of young men started following me, catcalling at first, then getting closer. I was terrified. And then 3 motorcycles pulled up. Your people. They didn't say a word to me. They just positioned themselves between me and those men, and the men scattered like roaches. She smiled faintly. One of your brothers, older gentleman with a gray beard, he tipped his head to me and said, "You're all right now, ma'am. Get home safe." Then they rode off. I asked around after that. Found out this was your clubhouse. Found out you have a reputation for protecting people who can't protect themselves. So I saved up every dollar I had left, and I came here. Because if the church won't help me, and the police won't help me, and the lawyers won't help me, maybe the people everyone else is afraid of will. Jack felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. That older gentleman with the gray beard was Ray, his chapter president. And what Eleanor described wasn't unusual. The club had rules, old-school rules that went back decades. You didn't mess with women, kids, or the elderly. You didn't stand by and watch someone get hurt if you could stop it. It was simple, uncomplicated morality in a world that had made everything else complicated. The money, Jack said, nodding toward the envelope. Put it away. You're going to need it. Eleanor's eyes widened. But I have to pay you. I can't just ask for charity. You're not asking for charity, Jack said. You're asking for family. And family doesn't charge. He stood up and offered her his hand. Come on. Let's get you inside where it's warm, and we'll figure out what we're dealing with. Eleanor took his hand, her grip stronger than he expected, and let him help her to her feet. As they walked toward the clubhouse entrance, she stopped and looked up at him. Why are you helping me? She asked. You don't know me. Jack thought about his wife, about his son, about all the people who'd turned away when he needed help most, about the brothers who'd shown up instead, who'd pulled him back from the edge. Because someone helped me once when I had nothing left, he said. And because you're right. The people who should have helped you didn't. So we will. Inside the clubhouse, the atmosphere shifted the moment Jack walked in with Eleanor. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Brothers turned to look, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. This wasn't their usual scene. The clubhouse was a sanctuary, a place where they could be themselves without judgment, but it was also a masculine space, all leather and motor oil and the kind of rough camaraderie that came from shared roads and shared scars. An elderly woman in a pink dress didn't fit the picture. But Ray saw them and was on his feet immediately, crossing the room with the easy authority of someone who'd been leading men for longer than most of them had been alive. He was a big man, 6'3" and broad-shouldered, with a gray beard that reached halfway down his chest. Jack, he said, his voice a low rumble. Then he turned to Eleanor, and his expression softened. Ma'am, you look like you've had a rough night. Eleanor straightened her spine, summoning what dignity she had left. I apologize for the intrusion. Your friend was kind enough to listen to me. Ray glanced at Jack, reading something in his road captain's face that made him nod slowly. No apology necessary. Any friend of Jack's is welcome here. Let's get you some coffee and a dry seat. He gestured to one of the brothers. Polly, grab a chair. Clean one. Within minutes, Eleanor was seated at the main table with a steaming mug of coffee in her hands and a blanket someone had pulled from a back room draped around her shoulders. Jack stood beside her and gave Ray the short version of Eleanor's story. As he spoke, more brothers drifted over, forming a loose circle around the table. These weren't young men looking for trouble. Most of them were in their 40s and 50s, weathered by life and held together by something stronger than blood. There was Paulie, a former construction foreman who'd lost his business in the recession and found purpose on the road. There was Danny, who'd done 2 tours in Iraq and come home to a country that didn't know what to do with him. And there was Frankie, the former cop, who listened to Jack's summary with the focused intensity of someone trained to spot lies and inconsistencies. When Jack finished, the room was quiet. Then Paulie spoke up, his voice rough as gravel. So this Lane guy, he's running some kind of scam on old folks? Taking their money, Making their families disappear? Looks like it, Jack said. But it's more than that. He's got the system on his side. Judges, notaries, care facilities. He's not some street-level con artist. He's organized. Frankie leaned forward. You said you have documentation? Eleanor reached into her plastic bag again. Her hand trembled slightly as she pulled out something else, something she'd been carrying close. A small flash drive in a plastic sandwich bag, and next to it, a folded piece of paper. After Tommy disappeared, she said quietly, I went back to his apartment. The landlord was about to clear it out, rent it to someone else. I begged him to give me one more day. I needed to look for something, anything that might tell me what happened. Her voice wavered. I found these hidden in a shoebox under his bed. The note is in Tommy's handwriting. She handed the note to Jack. He unfolded it carefully. The paper was crumpled and stained, but the words were clear. In case something happens, everything you need is on the drive. I'm not crazy. I know what he's doing. Victor Lane is dangerous. Don't trust him. Don't trust anyone who works with him. If you're reading this, it means I was right to be scared. The room went cold. Ray picked up the note and read it twice, his expression darkening. This is a man who knew he was in danger, he said, and he tried to protect himself. Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. He tried to tell me. 2 weeks before he disappeared, he called me late at night. He was crying. He said Victor had been asking him questions about his apartment, his bank accounts, his medical history. He said he felt like he was being watched. I told him he was being paranoid, that the headaches were making him anxious. I told him to trust the doctors. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't listen to him. And now he's gone. Jack put a hand on her shoulder. You didn't know? Lane's a professional. He's good at making people doubt themselves. Frankie was already setting up his laptop. Let's see what's on this drive. He plugged it in and started navigating through the files. The room fell silent except for the clicking of keys and the low hum of the hard drive. Jack watched Frankie's face as he worked, saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes narrowed. After 10 minutes, Frankie sat back and let out a long breath. This is bad, he said. Worse than I thought. He turned the laptop so everyone could see. On the screen were rows of files, each one labeled with a name and a date. There were at least 30 of them. Frankie opened the first one. It was a scanned document, a power of attorney form signed by an elderly man named Robert Chun, dated 3 years ago. Attached to it were bank statements showing transfers of over $100,000 from Chen's accounts to an LLC controlled by Victor Lane. There was also a death certificate for Robert Chun, dated 6 months after the power of attorney was signed. Cause of death, natural causes. Frankie opened another file. This one belonged to a woman named Dorothy Hayes. Same pattern. Power of attorney, asset transfers, and a death certificate. Then another, and another. Each file told the same story. Elderly individuals, isolated and vulnerable, signing over control of their lives to Victor Lane. Assets drained systematically. And then, in most cases, death. Some were listed as natural causes, others as accidents. One was listed as suicide. This isn't just elder abuse, Frankie said. This is serial exploitation. Maybe worse. Some of these death certificates look legitimate, but the timing is too convenient. Right after their accounts are emptied, they die. That's not coincidence. Eleanor's hand went to her mouth, her face pale. Are you saying he killed them? Frankie hesitated. I'm saying it's possible. At minimum, he neglected them. Let them die because they were no longer useful. At worst, he actively caused their deaths to cover his tracks. The room erupted in low, angry murmurs. Ray held up a hand for silence. We need to be smart about this, he said. If Lane's connected enough to pull this off for years without getting caught, he's got protection. We can't just roll up on him and expect justice to happen. Danny, the veteran, spoke up. So what do we do? Sit on this while he keeps destroying lives? No, Ray said. We take this to people who can actually do something with it. Federal authorities. Maybe the FBI. But we need more than a flash drive. We need witnesses. We need proof that connects Lane directly to fraud and harm. If you're tired of seeing powerful people hurt the weak and walk away, hit subscribe. This channel doesn't forget. Jack looked at Eleanor. You said Tommy's in a facility somewhere. Do you know which one? Eleanor shook her head. They wouldn't tell me. But the police report mentioned something about a private care center in Riverside County. I tried calling every facility in the area. None of them would confirm or deny he was there. Frankie made a note. I can pull commitment records from the county database. If Tommy was involuntarily committed, there'll be a paper trail. Judge's signature, psychiatric evaluation, all of it. Give me a few hours. What about the other families? Polly asked. The people in those files. Are any of them still alive? Frankie scrolled through the list. Some of these dates are recent. This one, Patricia Wolf, her power of attorney was signed 4 months ago. No death certificate on file yet. If she's still alive, she might be able to testify. Ray nodded. We find the living victims. We document everything. We build a case so airtight that Lane can't weasel out of it. And we do it fast, before he figures out someone's onto him. Eleanor looked around the table at the faces of these men, strangers an hour ago, now organizing themselves into a rescue operation on behalf of a grandson they'd never met. Why are you doing this? She asked. You don't owe me anything. Ray met her eyes. We've all got people we couldn't save, he said. We've all stood by and watched the system chew someone up because we didn't know how to fight it. Maybe we can't fix the past, but we can fix this. And that's enough. Eleanor's tears finally came, silent and unstoppable. She didn't try to hide them. The next 72 hours were a blur of phone calls, database searches, and quiet surveillance. Frankie worked his contacts, pulling records that weren't supposed to be accessible to civilians. He found Tommy's commitment order buried in Riverside County's psychiatric hold database, signed by a judge who'd rubber-stamped over 200 similar orders in the past year. The facility was called Serenity Meadows, a private psychiatric hospital 40 miles outside the city. Jack and 2 brothers rode out there the next morning, not to break in, but to observe. They parked across the street and watched the comings and goings. The place looked legitimate from the outside. Manicured lawns, tasteful signage, a parking lot full of expensive cars. But there were bars on some of the windows, and the few patients they saw in the courtyard moved with the sluggish gait of people heavily medicated. How many you think are in there against their will? One of the brothers asked. Jack didn't answer. He didn't want to think about it. Back at the clubhouse, Frankie had made progress on the other victims. He'd tracked down 3 families who'd lost elderly relatives under suspicious circumstances, all tied to Victor Lane. One family, the daughter of Patricia Wolf, agreed to meet with them. Her name was Karen, a woman in her 50s who worked as a nurse and knew something was wrong, but hadn't been able to prove it. She came to the clubhouse on a Tuesday evening, nervous but determined. Jack and Ray sat down with her in a back room while Eleanor waited outside. My mother signed everything over to Victor Lane 6 months ago, Karen said, her hands shaking. She said he was helping her manage her medications, her bills, all of it. I didn't think much of it at first. Mom was sharp, fully capable. But then she started declining fast. Confused, disoriented. I tried to visit her, but Victor said she didn't want to see me. Said we'd had a fight, and she needed space. That was a lie. We never fought. Her voice cracked. Last month, I finally got into her house. Victor had changed the locks, but I got a locksmith. The place was empty. All her valuables, gone. Her bank accounts, drained. And there was a note from Victor saying she'd been moved to a care facility for her own safety. I haven't seen her since. Ray leaned forward. Do you know which facility? Serenity Meadows, Karen said, and Jack's blood ran cold. Same place as Tommy, he said. Karen's eyes widened. There are others? At least 2 that we know of, Frankie said, entering the room with his laptop. And probably more. Lane's using Serenity Meadows as a dumping ground. Once he's drained their assets, he has them committed under false diagnoses, and they disappear from public record. It's clean, efficient, and almost impossible to challenge because the medical evaluations are done by doctors on his payroll. Karen put her head in her hands. How is this legal? How has no one stopped him? Because the system's designed to trust professionals, Frankie said. Judges assume doctors are acting in good faith. Facilities assume commitment orders are legitimate. And by the time family members figure out something's wrong, the victim's already been labeled incompetent. Their word doesn't matter anymore. The room fell silent. Then Ray spoke. We're going to need leverage. Something that forces the authorities to act immediately, not 6 months from now after a lengthy investigation. We need to make noise. Jack knew what Ray was suggesting. It was risky, maybe illegal, but it was effective. We go public, Jack said. We contact the media. Give them the story, the documents, everything. Make it so big that Lane can't hide and the feds can't ignore it. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her face pale but resolute. If we do that, we put a target on our backs. Victor has money, connections. He'll come after us. Let him, Jack said. We've got something he doesn't. We've got the truth. And we've got people who won't back down. Ray looked at Jack, then at Eleanor. But before we bring in the media, he said slowly, we need one more piece. We need someone on the inside who'll talk. Someone from that facility who's seen what's really happening. Frankie nodded. That's where we come in. Over the next 2 days, the brothers used their network to identify staff members at Serenity Meadows. Frankie found a night shift nurse named Angela Torres who'd been working there for 3 years. She had a clean record, no connection to Lane, and based on her social media, she seemed like someone with a conscience. Danny knew a guy who knew her cousin. The connection was thin, but it was enough. They approached her carefully, not at the facility, but at a coffee shop near her apartment on her day off. Jack and Frankie went alone, no leather, no bikes, nothing that would scare her. Just 2 men asking for help. At first, Angela was defensive. She didn't know them, didn't trust them, and wasn't about to risk her job for strangers. But when Frankie showed her Tommy's note, when he pulled up the files on his laptop, when he showed her the pattern of elderly patients being committed and drained, her expression changed. I knew something was wrong, she said quietly, her hands shaking around her coffee cup. I've been working in psych care for 10 years. I know what dementia looks like. I know what real psychiatric emergencies look like. And some of these patients, they're not sick. They're confused, yeah, but not dangerous. Not incompetent. I've tried to raise concerns, but the doctors shut me down. They say I'm not qualified to make that assessment. Frankie leaned forward. If you testify, if you go on record, we can stop this. But we need you to tell us what you've seen. Angela was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded. There's a patient. Room 14B. Thomas Mayfield. He shouldn't be there. He's lucid most of the time. Asks for his grandmother constantly. The staff's been told he's delusional, that the grandmother doesn't exist. But I looked him up. She does exist. Eleanor Mayfield. She's been calling the facility for months, and we've been instructed to turn her away. Jack felt something tighten in his chest. Can you get us in? Angela looked at him like he'd lost his mind. You want to break into a psychiatric facility? No, Jack said. I want to visit my brother. Angela stared at him. Then understanding dawned. You're going to pose as family. Eleanor hired me as her son, Jack said. That makes Tommy my brother. Legally, I should be able to visit. If they turn me away, that's another piece of evidence that something's wrong. Angela thought about it. Then she pulled out her phone and opened the facility's staff portal. Visiting hours are 2 to 4 on weekdays. Family members have to be on an approved list. Tommy's list is empty except for Victor Lane, who's listed as his legal guardian. She looked up at Jack. But if you show up with documentation, power of attorney papers, something that shows you're acting on Eleanor's behalf, they might let you through. Especially if you're calm, professional, not making a scene. Frankie was already typing on his laptop. I can draft the documents. We've got Eleanor's real power of attorney papers from before Lane forged his. We can create an addendum that names Jack as her representative. It won't hold up in court, but it'll look legitimate enough to get him through the door. Jack nodded. When? Tomorrow, Angela said. I work the day shift tomorrow. I'll make sure I'm at the front desk when you arrive. I'll vouch for you. Say I verified the documents. Once you're in, you'll have 30 minutes max before someone checks on you. Use it wisely. The next afternoon, Jack walked into Serenity Meadows wearing jeans, a button-down shirt, and a calm expression that didn't match the rage simmering under his skin. He carried a folder with the forged documents Frankie had prepared and a small recording device hidden in his jacket pocket. Angela was at the front desk, just as she'd promised. She looked up when he entered, and her eyes flickered with recognition before she smoothed her expression into professional neutrality. Can I help you? I'm here to visit Thomas Mayfield, Jack said. I'm his uncle, acting on behalf of his grandmother, Eleanor Mayfield. I have power of attorney documentation. He slid the folder across the desk. Angela opened it, made a show of examining the papers, and nodded. Everything appears to be in order. Room 14B. Down the hall, take a left, third door on the right. Visiting hours end at 4. Thank you, Jack said. He walked down the hallway, his boots silent on the polished linoleum. The facility was clean, quiet, sterile. It smelled like antiseptic and despair. He found room 14B and knocked once before opening the door. Tommy Mayfield was sitting by the window, staring out at nothing. He was thinner than in the photos Eleanor had shown Jack, his eyes hollow and uncertain. When he turned to look at Jack, there was no recognition, just wary confusion. Tommy, Jack said quietly. My name's Jack. I'm a friend of your grandmother's. Eleanor sent me. Tommy's expression didn't change. My grandmother's dead. They told me she died 6 months ago. They lied to you, Jack said. Eleanor's alive. She's been looking for you since the day you disappeared. She's the one who found the flash drive you hid in your apartment. The one with all the evidence on Victor Lane. Tommy's eyes widened. For the first time, Jack saw a spark of something. Hope, fear, relief, all mixed together. She found it. She found it, Jack confirmed. And she didn't give up. She came to me, asked me to help her find you. We've been building a case against Lane. We know what he did. We know about the forged documents, the stolen money, all of it. But we need you to tell us what happened in here. What they did to you. Tommy's hands started shaking. They keep me sedated. Most days I can barely think straight. They tell me I'm dangerous, that I'm sick, that no one's coming for me. I started to believe them. His voice broke. I started to think maybe I was crazy. You're not crazy, Jack said. You were right about Lane. You were right to be scared. And your grandmother never stopped fighting for you. Tommy looked at him, really looked at him, and Jack saw the man Eleanor had described. Smart, responsible, scared, but not broken. How do I get out of here? We're working on it, Jack said. But I need you to do something for me. I need you to stay strong for a few more days. We're going public with this story. Once the media picks it up, once the feds get involved, they'll have to release you. But until then, you need to hold on. Tommy nodded slowly. Tell my grandma I'm sorry. For not listening to her. For trusting Lane. You tell her yourself, Jack said. Soon, Jack left the facility with the recording of his conversation with Tommy and a fire in his gut that wouldn't go out. He drove straight back to the clubhouse where Eleanor, Ray, and Frankie were waiting. He's alive, Jack said. He's in there, and he's lucid. They've been keeping him sedated and telling him Eleanor's dead. Eleanor's hand went to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Is he okay? He's scared. He's tired. But he's strong, Jack said. He's your grandson. He didn't break. Ray stood up. Then we move now. We've got everything we need. The documents, the testimony from Angela and Karen, the recording from Tommy. It's time to bring in Lisa Park. Frankie reached out to a journalist he'd worked with years ago, a woman named Lisa Park who'd built her career on exposing corruption. She was skeptical at first, hardened by too many false leads and dead ends. But when Frankie sent her a sample of the files from Tommy's flash drive along with Angela's written statement and Jack's recording, She called back within an hour. They met at a diner 20 miles outside town, neutral ground where they wouldn't be seen. Lisa was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and direct, with the kind of relentless energy that came from believing her work mattered. She listened to Eleanor's story without interrupting, taking notes on a worn legal pad. When Eleanor finished, Lisa sat back and let out a slow breath. "This is a hell of a story," she said. "But I need corroboration. I need to verify the documents, talk to other families, get comment from the facility and from Lane himself. This is going to take time." "We don't have time," Jack said. "Every day Lane's free. He's got access to more victims. He could be moving money, destroying evidence, anything." Lisa met his gaze, unflinching. "I understand. But if I run this without proper verification, he'll sue me and the paper into oblivion and the story dies. You want this to stick, we do it right. Give me 1 week. I'll have something ready to publish." Jack didn't like it, but he knew she was right. 1 week, he agreed. Lisa turned to Eleanor. "I'm going to need you to go on record. Your name, your face. This story doesn't work if it's anonymous." Eleanor didn't hesitate. "Whatever it takes." Over the next 7 days, Lisa worked around the clock. She tracked down 5 more families who'd lost relatives to Victor Lane's scheme. She verified the documents on Tommy's flash drive with forensic accountants and handwriting experts. She interviewed Angela Torres on the record. She reached out to Serenity Meadows for comment and was stonewalled. She contacted Victor Lane's office and was threatened with legal action if she published anything defamatory. She published anyway. The story broke on a Thursday morning, front page of the Metro section with a headline that pulled no punches. "Local advocate accused of exploiting elderly, draining fortunes while victims disappear." The article was thorough, devastating, and backed by mountains of evidence. It included interviews with Eleanor, Karen, Angela, and 3 other families. It included copies of forged documents, bank records, and death certificates. And it included a photograph of Victor Lane, smiling at a charity event, the picture of respectability. The response was immediate. By noon, Lane's office had released a statement denying all allegations and threatening to sue for libel. By 2 in the afternoon, the district attorney's office announced they were opening an investigation. By evening, news outlets across the state had picked up the story. Within 3 days, federal agents arrived at Lane's office with a search warrant. Jack watched the news coverage from the clubhouse, surrounded by brothers who'd spent the past week doing everything from surveillance to legal research to simply sitting with Eleanor when the weight of it all became too much. Ray stood beside him. "We did it," he said. "We got the ball rolling." "It's not over yet," Jack said. "Lane's got lawyers. He'll fight this." "Let him fight," Ray said. "We've got something he can't buy. We've got people who give a damn." That night, Jack helped Eleanor move from the motel where she'd been staying for safety back to her small apartment at Riverside Court. With the story out and federal agents involved, the immediate danger had passed. As he walked her to her door, she stopped and turned to him. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You gave me back my voice. You made people listen." Jack shook his head. "You did that yourself. You didn't give up. You kept fighting even when everyone told you to stop. That takes more courage than anything we did." Eleanor smiled. "My grandson is still in that place. We haven't gotten him out yet." "We will," Jack promised. "The feds are involved now. They'll get him released, and they'll make sure Lane pays for what he did." "And what about you?" Eleanor asked. "What do you get out of this?" Jack thought about his wife, about his son, about all the years he'd spent keeping people at arm's length because letting them in hurt too much. "I get to know I didn't walk away," he said. "That's enough." Eleanor reached up and hugged him. Jack held her carefully and felt something in his chest loosen. When she pulled away, she was crying again, but this time it was different. This time it looked like relief. "Be honest, if you were in Jack's position, would you walk away or stand your ground?" Comment below. The federal investigation moved faster than Jack expected, though not without deliberate work. Over the course of several weeks, Agents raided Serenity Meadows and found discrepancies in patient records, evidence of overmedication, and financial irregularities that suggested kickbacks from Victor Lane. Investigators interviewed staff, reviewed records, and built their case methodically. 6 weeks after the story broke, the facility's license was suspended and patients were being transferred to state-supervised care. Tommy Mayfield was among the first to be released. Jack and Eleanor were there when he walked out, blinking in the afternoon sun like a man waking from a nightmare. He was thinner than Jack remembered from their brief meeting, his eyes still hollow but clearing. Eleanor moved toward him as quickly as her 78-year-old body would allow and wrapped her arms around him. Tommy held her like he wasn't sure she was real. "Grandma," he said, his voice rough from disuse. I didn't know if you'd come. I never stopped looking for you," Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. "Never. Not for a single day." Tommy's eyes found Jack over Eleanor's shoulder. Recognition flickered across his face. "You came back," he said. "I told you I would," Jack said. Over the next few weeks, Tommy's story emerged in pieces. Victor Lane had targeted him after meeting Eleanor, seeing an opportunity in a young man with early cognitive issues and no other family. Lane had arranged for Tommy to see a specific neurologist, one who falsified test results to make Tommy's condition seem worse than it was. Then Lane had used forged power of attorney documents to have Tommy committed, claiming he was a danger to himself and others. Once inside Serenity Meadows, Tommy had been kept sedated, isolated, and told repeatedly that his grandmother had abandoned him, that no one was looking for him, that he'd be there for the rest of his life. It was psychological torture designed to break him down until he couldn't fight back. But Tommy had fought anyway. Before Lane's scheme fully closed around him, when Tommy still had moments of clarity between the headaches and confusion, he'd gathered what evidence he could. Bank statements he'd noticed were wrong. Notes about Lane's questions. Documents Lane had asked him to sign. He'd hidden the flash drive and the note in his apartment, a last desperate act of resistance before they came for him. "I knew my grandma wouldn't give up," he said one afternoon, sitting in Eleanor's small living room with Jack and a few of the brothers who'd helped with the investigation. "Even when they told me she was dead, I didn't believe it. She's too stubborn." Eleanor swatted his arm playfully. "I learned from the best," she said. Tommy turned to Jack. "She told me what you did. What all of you did. Posing as my uncle to get in there, getting Angela to help. All of it. I don't know how to repay that." "You just pass it on when you get the chance," Jack said. Tommy nodded slowly, understanding something that went deeper than words. Victor Lane's trial began 4 months after his arrest. The federal government charged him with wire fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, conspiracy, and in 3 cases, negligent homicide. The evidence was overwhelming. Prosecutors presented the files from Tommy's flash drive, testimony from victims and their families, Angela Torres's testimony about the facility's practices, and financial records showing Lane had stolen over $4 million across a decade. Expert witnesses testified about the forged documents, the falsified medical records, and the systematic way Lane had exploited the legal system. Lane's defense tried to argue that he'd been acting in good faith, that any irregularities were the result of clerical errors or misunderstandings. But the sheer volume of evidence made that impossible to believe. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge allowed victim impact statements. Eleanor was the first to speak. She stood at the podium, small and frail in her pink dress that she'd carefully mended and cleaned for this moment, and looked Victor Lane directly in the eye. "You thought I was invisible," she said, her voice steady and clear. "You thought because I was old, because I was a woman, because I didn't have money or power, that I didn't matter. You thought you could take my grandson and I'd just accept it. You were wrong." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You made a mistake when you underestimated me. But you made a bigger mistake when you underestimated the people who showed up when I asked for help. People you probably looked down on. People you thought were beneath you. They saw me when no one else did. They listened when no one else would. And they fought for me when the system you manipulated turned its back. Her voice grew stronger. You stole years from my grandson. You stole lives from people who trusted you. You stole money, dignity, and peace from families who deserved better. But you didn't steal our voices. And you didn't steal our fight. We're still here. And you're going to prison. The courtroom was silent when she finished. Even the judge looked moved. Karen spoke next, then the families of 2 other victims who hadn't survived Lane's scheme. Each testimony was a hammer blow, driving home the human cost of what Lane had done. When the last statement was read, the judge announced the sentence. 22 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole. Restitution to be paid to all victims, though everyone knew the money was mostly gone. Victor Lane showed no emotion as he was led away in handcuffs. But Eleanor saw his face as he passed, and for just a moment, she saw fear. The kind of fear she'd lived with for months. The kind of fear he'd inflicted on so many others. It felt like justice. After the trial, life slowly returned to something resembling normal. Tommy moved into a small house 2 blocks from Eleanor's apartment, close enough that they could see each other every day. He started working again, part-time at first, rebuilding the life that had been stolen from him. Eleanor continued her routine, grocery shopping on Tuesdays, church on Sundays, coffee with friends on Thursday mornings. But there was one new addition to her schedule. Every Saturday afternoon, she drove out to the clubhouse and had dinner with the brothers.